Buenas, buenas, buenas. I'm Vanessa, the host of Chicklit, a book review podcast empowering women to decenter men. Each episode, I'll unlock the power of stories by exploring popular chicklit themes and use them as a starting point for insightful conversations. Today, my friend Krystal and we are reviewing the book Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria by Beverly Daniel Tatum. And I'm really excited to have you, Krystal, on the podcast. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me, Vanessa. I've been following you for a while now, and I'm just really excited to finally be able to share space with you and talk about the issues that are going on in the world today.
I love that the internet brought us together. I was just posting, I had this podcast and you came across it and we just connected ever since then. And I think I've shared with you before, it's very nice when you make friends with people based on your values, right? That's what connects us is we're talking about Black Lives Matter or things of that nature and we connect and we feel safe with each other, and I like that we've been able to do that in 2024, now 2025. I think that's really important because it can be really isolating, right?
Mhm.
When I was a teacher, I would go to school and I would disrupt and interrupt these systems. And it's oftentimes I was very alone and I was the bad guy in the room. And so knowing that I have a friend in you, it really makes me feel a lot better. So I love that you're here. I love everything that you're doing, with law school. You're graduating in May. I'm so excited for you. That's such a
You.
big accomplishment.
Thank you. I relate to you. I know being a disruptor is not popular. And sometimes there's backlash. I mean, you're talking to someone who back in 2013 who used to post on Facebook like Black Lives Matter, and I had whole crowds of people coming at me because of that. Because even to think that saying something as simple as Black Lives Matter would cause so much chaos, and this is 2013,
Yeah.
it's
And we're still struggling with those same issues today in 2025. And I feel that sense of frustration, and I don't want to say hopelessness because I don't feel hopeless. It's just it's all heavy, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm really excited that, I know when this episode airs, it's going to be after your session with the Latina Writing Comunidad, but I'm really excited that you're going to be sharing that knowledge, and a lot of women who want to be lawyers are going to be attending, but also a lot of women who are just they have a corporate job or maybe they're moms. There's a lot of people that are going that just want to hear from you and learn from you, and so I'm really excited to have you on the workshop. How are you feeling about the workshop?
I think I feel better about the workshop than even today's episode. Like I was sharing with you earlier, it's just, hard to talk about race. And I know we're speaking from our lived experiences, but nonetheless, I feel like when you speak about something like systemic racism and just how the current political climate is in the US, it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And so I feel better about speaking about going to law school as a Latina versus talking about the themes of the book. But I think that's why it's so important that we're having this conversation, and that you chose even to do, the book. Why are all the Black kids sitting together in the cafeteria? Because it's important. We need to talk about these things.
Yeah, and I know that it frustrates a lot of people, but I think that it makes a lot of people feel safe. Hearing from you, hearing from me, I think that there's a lot of people who are going to listen to the podcast and feel good about hearing from us and our experience, and I try to focus on that. And it's hard. I know it's hard. You live it and it's hard. I live it and it's hard, but at least we're doing it
No, and
together, right?
that's a good point to bring up, actually, focusing on the people that it will reach and will resonate with. And I should have more of that focus. It's just so hard lately with everything going on. Even at my school, I've experienced, classmates saying things that are discriminatory. And I also had a situation in the past few weeks where a classmate told me, "You talk too much about race." So going through that kind of stuff is, but anyway, I'm glad that I'm here and
Yeah.
we can make space for each other and for other people that are listening.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the book even talks about that, right? Where she talks about how for people who do fit into the norm, they don't like to talk about race because it's not a factor for them.
Hmm.
Whereas black people, it is a factor for them because anytime that they're in a space, they feel that they are different, whereas when you're part of the majority, if you walk into a room, no one's no one's like signaling you out or calling, not calling you out, but making you feel uncomfortable just for existing. And that's not the case. Honestly, even for me, when I walk into a room, like, no one knows that I'm Latina unless I tell you. Like, that's how I am. I tell everyone that I'm Colombian, but I very easily could lean into my German last name and lean into how I look and completely ignore my Latinidad. Like, that is an option, right? But I've never been that way. I feel like I have a lot of privilege that, like, people look at me and they feel safe with me, and so I feel like it's my job to push that conversation on them because of all of my privileges, and I the book even talks about that. Like, there's a whole process of, and I know the process, the theory crosses model of black identity development. Like, it's for black people, but I think it also pertains to us first gens of any country, right? But we process and go through this not identity crisis, but identity exploration, and there's a wide range. And I don't know, do you want to talk about that exploration? Like, how does your Latinidad kind of like affect you?
Sure. Well, I wanted to first start off by saying I also have privilege. I have white privilege, being white passing. And I also agree with you that, like, some people are able to walk into rooms and hide parts of their identity in order to, like, establish themselves amongst the dominant group, which we know in this country is white cisgender males. But I think that the theory really does work for anybody of a racial or ethnic minority, because even when Dr. Tatum talks about adolescents usually go through where they develop this oppositional theory, because they're like, oh well, I don't want to be associated with the dominant group. I don't want to be accused of being trying to be white because I'm smart or because I talk a certain way or I listen to a certain type of music. I think we all can relate to that. Like, I know I related to that, especially around the middle school age. I went to a predominantly white middle school, but there was a large population of Hispanics. And I remember trying to associate with all the Hispanic children because I was like, well, I know I'm not white. Yeah, I can pass as white, but let's be real, white people know when you're not white. So, like, I also went through things as a kid where, like, yeah, I could pass as white, but white people knew I wasn't white, so they wouldn't, like, welcome me into their groups. And then when I went to middle school, I was like, oh, like, this group of people welcome me. They want to be my friends. We relate to each other culturally. We eat the same foods. We listen to the same music. So I did want to, like, group myself with a certain population, and I did sit at the Hispanic table in the lunchroom, and that carried on into high school. So I do think the theory fits well for, like, any racial or ethnic minority.
It's funny, as I've grown, I've seen myself go through each stage, right? Like, the first one where you reject it, or maybe you're exploring it and you're questioning it, and then you like immerse yourself in it, where it's like, well, some people do, right? Some people don't. They completely reject it and they go down another path. And I disagree, and I wish that wasn't the case, but at the same time, like, you understand, right? Where like I can understand why an ethnic person would reject their group and go with the majority because it's safer, right? You can get better jobs, you can get promotions, you're just like safer when you're in. I can understand. I disagree. I That will never be me. It's like very unfortunate that that's the case, right? Where we have to, that's an option for people to reject themselves, their history, their ancestors, everything, to in order to be safe. Like, it's, I wish that weren't the case, but hopefully there will be a world where that's not the case, right? By all of us doing these things and pushing the envelope and trying to make like a better world for everyone. I hope that stops being the case, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think we even see that now. Well, we do see it now with a lot of Hispanics and Latinos are, they've come from either immigrant parents or grandparents or great grandparents, but once they've assimilated into the dominant culture here, you see a lot of people, like, trying to be more affiliated with dominant group, which is, white people.
White, yeah.
But I think that's because they feel more accepted, they feel safer. That's why, I mean, you saw that, but you shared a picture on Instagram of, like, someone with a Latinos for Trump shirt being detained by ICE. And I know it was Photoshopped, which I wish a lot more people would realize. That's another thing. But nonetheless, that kind of picture speaks volumes because it shows just how much like racial or ethnic minorities will go to like be affiliated with whiteness. And I think that also leads into the conversation of how sometimes we as racial or ethnic minorities also uphold white supremacy, right? Police brutality. That's an issue that I speak out a lot about because I worked in a civil rights firm in Chicago for 7 months before law school, and I dealt with victims of police brutality. I also worked in Atlanta for a civil rights team for 7 months as well. So I have over a year of experience in civil rights, and I did the math before and I shared it was like 86% of the cases I worked on, the victims were black. And so that's just like I hate when people say like, oh, it's just one bad apple. They can't define the whole system, or they say stupid things like, oh well, they shouldn't be resisting, or they should just follow the rules, without realizing that like these things don't happen because you're not following the rules. These things are stemming from a larger issue of like there's racial profiling, there's racial policing practices. If you live in a certain zip code, there's going to be a heavier police presence there and things like that. So I really like speaking about that kind of stuff and highlighting that kind of stuff. And it bothers me that sometimes when I'm so vocal about it, even some of I've had family members and friends in the past that are Latino and Hispanic, and they'll say like, "Oh, you need to stop talking about that stuff. Why do you care so much?" Or even say things like, "Well, it's never happened to you." So, but I think that's the problem when you have that mindset of like, "Well, it hasn't happened to me, so I'm not going to care about it." I think that leads to a larger issue because you don't care about it, and maybe it hasn't happened to you, but one day it will, right?
Or it could, right? Or to your a loved one, someone that you know, and that's when you're gonna care? When it's at your front door? Like, that shouldn't be the case, like, we should be caring all the time for
Mm-hmm.
everyone, right? Like, try to avoid those things from happening, yeah. It's definitely unfortunate, and I definitely know what you mean with like the practices as well. Like when I was a teacher, there were some rules where it's like this is only pertains to black girls. Like where the schools they'll often say where you can't have braids with color in it, like pink
Mm-hmm.
or blue or anything. It's like that's only for black girls. Like white girls don't wear braids with colors in it, and maybe some do, but that's not a common cultural like thing, right? Only black girls do it. So it's like these things that we have in place, or like Jordans. Their dress code was that they couldn't wear Jordans.
Yeah.
Again, wearing Jordans is part of the black like community, right? Not all of them obviously, and obviously some white people do. I have Jordans, I have Dunks, like I'm not black, but the point is that it's like that's their culture and they're part of their identity, and when you have things in place that target specifically them, like that's an issue. Like
Yeah.
and we have to try to combat those things because then when it comes to police or even hiring practices, like I know that affirmative action is now being undone by the current administration, right? And even that, it's like people have this misconception that it's this thing where, oh, you're black, okay, you get the job. And that's not the case. It just makes it a more fair application process so that you have to welcome other people in, not just people of the dominant group. Like you're welcoming of everyone. And the hiring process, where if you have two people who are equally qualified, equally impressive, equally smart and capable, and all of these things, you don't just choose the one who reminds you of your son,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because when you do that, which is a natural human occurrence, it's not even like white people consciously being racist, right? It's just natural. If you have to choose between someone who looks like you and someone who doesn't look like you, it's a natural thing to choose someone that looks like you. So it's like affirmative action kind of undoes those unconscious behind the scenes things that our brains naturally do, so to be able to give people an opportunity, because if you don't, it's just going to always favor the dominant group. And like you said, when you look at the numbers, at the statistics, the racial profiling, when you look at hiring practices, when you look at CEO numbers, when you actually look at the data, it
Mm-hmm.
really shows us that these things are an issue and we have to address them. And we know what happens when they don't go addressed. Like we suffer in the masses. And it's like, one of the things that I always try to use to convince people, which I'm not in the business of convincing people. I think everyone that listens to my podcast and is part of the Latina Writing Comunidad, I think they're all aware of the things that we're talking about. So I'm not in the business of convincing people, but I know some people are. So if you're trying to convince people, one thing that I think that has helped me is like if we don't allow like black people or Latinas or indigenous people or other ethnic groups or women, right? If we don't let them participate, that's a wealth of knowledge that society as a whole, like, is missing out on.
Mm-hmm.
That is dangerous, right? Like, there's someone out there with, like, the cure to some really rare disease that if we are not allowing them the opportunity to go to college or pay for college or sustain themselves through college or and, like, the predatory, like, loan system, right? Like, if we just put all of these blockers for everyone who isn't, like, a rich white dude to go to school, like, we're really eliminating a lot of amazing things from happening in our society, and that is scary to me. We are all so smart and we can bring so much to the table, and we have to make sure that everyone has access to these spaces. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I think has helped me in my conversations, but I don't know. What do you think? What has helped you in
Yeah, well, I think
moments?
one, recognizing there's an issue, and then two, doing something about it. So like all my life I've been one of those people that I'm like a problem solver. So I mean, most recently, like my school was the only law school in Georgia that didn't have an organization for Latino or Hispanic students, so I created it.
Yeah.
Back in 2015, when I was living in a neighborhood with high rates of gun violence, and there was a shooting right a few blocks away from my children and I when we were at a prayer vigil. What did my friend and I do the next week? We created a gun violence prevention organization. Like, so I'm always like seeing it when there's an issue and like solving it. So I think when we're talking about like there's a bunch of people that are being prevented from accessing higher education or certain employment opportunities, like that all stems from somewhere. So like the educational stuff. I work with high schoolers now through a mentorship program that I also created with the help of other people though, but I spearheaded it. And I do want to point out, like, I'm taking credit for these things because I feel like a lot of times we don't take credit for the work we do. And so yes, I started it, I spearheaded it. I did have help from other people, and I acknowledge that and I appreciate them. But I started that, and there wasn't a thing like that before. And so now we're working with high schoolers in Georgia, and one of the high schools with the highest dropout rates. And we're talking to them about college, about the legal field. Even if they don't want to go into law, we're telling them, hey, we'll help you apply for internships this summer. I'm going to help a student probably after this call apply to a STEM internship. He doesn't even have a resume. He didn't like so there's like students in high schools across the country that don't have access to mentors, don't have access to anything and how to get to college. They didn't know what the SAT was or the ACT. And it's like how and I don't blame them. I blame the system. And I'm not even going to blame the teachers as individuals. It's again, it's the system. So like what kind of district policies are in place telling the teachers like we have to have our children ready to apply for college in this level, ready to take the SAT at this level. We have to do resume workshops with them. They have nothing in place like that because I spoke to students from 9th to 12th grade that didn't know what a resume was or how to make one. That's crazy because
Yeah.
I know if you went to a school in another part of Georgia that had a way lower dropout rate, they would not be telling you the same thing.
Yeah. And
Um,
that school probably has more funding. So they probably have more teachers and they have more staff to help and support with these extra things that are not extra. They're needed to be like part of society, right? Like resume building and practicing for the SAT. Like those are things that these schools have because they have the funding for it and the teachers are getting paid well.
mhm.
Whereas in these schools where the dropout rate is really low, teachers are overworked, classrooms are huge, there's not enough staff, they're underpaid. Like it's like no shit they don't have the SAT. Like they just have to go in and like teach the lesson and like leave. It's like pretty terrible. It's
Yeah,
really bad.
yeah. It's just again, it's a systemic issue, and
Exactly.
I mean, I know you shared, you know, you were a teacher. My mom was a bilingual teacher in Chicago public schools. And I also, before I went to law school, worked as a substitute teacher. And it sounds crazy to say, but it's like it was so easy just for me to begin substitute teaching with a bachelor's degree without any teaching experience, just because I had a bachelor's degree, because the need for public school teachers was so high. So that's another issue in itself. But I was able to just graduate from college and start working in Chicago public schools at tier one schools, which are like the high risk schools, which pay more. And so, but I was going, yeah, because I needed money to support my family, but also because I felt like I could connect with those students in the high risk schools. And you see the problems there, they're right in front of you. I mean, my mom had students in the high school level that couldn't even read or write, and they're just getting passed by grade level to grade level. And like, she was actually told by administrators that they weren't allowed to fail students. And it's not like my mom wants to give people F's, but at the same time, you don't want to just be passing students that don't have literacy skills. But
Yeah.
they were told to do that. She was told to do that, and so and then her students, like, they were all Hispanic or Latino,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
all of them.
When I had, like, the 2nd graders and they couldn't read or write, it's like, okay, they're still little kids, they still have time, but then when you get to, like, 6th and 7th grade and those kids can't read or write, it's like, where can I teach them to read or write when we're doing, like, long division and statistics and learning about, like, Anne Frank and, we're doing these huge, big things, like, where am I supposed to teach them to read or write? And so
Mhm.
it's like, it was like, as a 7th grade teacher, 8th grade teacher, where I wanted to give them that education, it's, like, almost impossible when you have to teach these curriculum, like, standards that are grade level appropriate. It's, like, impossible, and so I wanted to blame the 6th grade teacher, but they were doing the same shit that I was doing, They were
Mhm.
just trying to teach them the curriculum and trying their best, and it's like, everyone's just trying their best. It's just very, like you said, it's systemic, and I think that it's really common in specifically in the demographic, like, these types of schools that we're talking about, it's really easy to blame the parents and just say, "Parents don't care, parents don't pay attention, there's no accountability." And in those areas where we're talking about high poverty rates, parents are going to their minimum wage jobs, oftentimes having 2 jobs, oftentimes not having money to put food on the table, not having money for rent. They don't have health insurance a lot of the time, and so it's like, literally, I would have students that couldn't see because they didn't have eye insurance, and it's like, what the fuck am I supposed to do at that point?
Mhm.
It's like, and so again, it's like, we can't be blaming, like, yes, we are all individuals, and yes, we have to take control over what we can control, like, obviously,
Mhm.
and also, there's a lot of systemic shit that's fucked up. Like,
Mhm.
I've mentioned on another podcast, like, I hate that health insurance is tied to work. I think that makes a really bad employee if the only reason why you're going to work is for health insurance. Like, we
Mhm.
should all be going to work because we are getting paid well, we're confident in ourselves, and we
Mhm.
know that this is the space that we want to be in. And I feel like you have that. So I'm excited for you to have that as a lawyer. Like, I feel like you're confident and you're knowledgeable, but as an ex-teacher who I felt like, I still to this day, I left teaching over 3 years ago. I still to this day feel super confident about the education field. Like, that is my area of expertise.
Mhm.
But I got burnt out being a teacher, just trying my best and it feeling like it wasn't enough and feeling like the only one that was trying my best. And
Mhm.
so, Mike, I have a question for you. It's like, when you become a lawyer and you are part of a practice, whether you start your own practice or you join a law firm, whatever your goal is, feel free to share that. But I am like, I'm always worried about people who are getting started in their field. Maybe not that you're just getting started, but you're turning a new leaf, a new chapter, and I'm worried that you're going to burn yourself out. I'm worried that you're going to, like, go and be like, I'm going to change, the United States justice system, and, like, what if you don't in 5 years? Like, what is your measure of success, maybe? Like, what are you using to measure your success, and how do you plan to do it sustainably? Because I don't want you to get burnt out.
Mhm. I appreciate you bringing that up. And I think when you're so passionate about the work you do in whatever field you are, whether it's education or housing, even policing, because, there are some good officers, even though they're part of a shitty system, there are some good officers, right? I mean,
Right.
one of my best friends is a police officer. And yet I can still sit here and speak about the issues in that system. But I think whenever you're passionate about the work you do, you inevitably are going to get burned out because there's not that many of us. I know a lot of people like to say like, oh, focus on the good, focus on the community that you have around you and the people that are doing things. But we are in the minority. Like, let's start there. Like, I'm literally one of 3, 4 students in my entire class that will like speak out about issues. Okay, so that should be telling. But I think to answer your question, I'm burnt out now because it's inevitable for people like us. And when I, start practicing, I'm really just going to keep doing the things I'm doing now that give me some sense of fulfillment, like mentoring high schoolers, undergraduates, future Latinas. I'm going to just keep giving back to people. And even if I find myself in a position at a firm that is not what I want to do or is not fulfilling to me, because we all know sometimes we take jobs because we just need to provide for ourselves. So if I find myself in a position like that, I mean, just keep doing the work that I'm doing. I think I really stand strong. I have strong feelings about the saying that, like, if you touch one person, like, you're changing one life, and that's enough. And you make change by like one person at a time. Sometimes it's not like a big. So I think, like, if we can touch one person, even like I mentioned earlier, like, I'm gonna help a high schooler apply to an internship program later today. Like, even exposing him to like something outside of his current world. Like, he didn't know about STEM or any of that stuff. I was explaining it to him, and I don't know about STEM either. But I was like, okay, like, this is what the flyer says. Here's what we got to do. So,
Let me Google what the S and T and E and M stand for. Yeah, what is this?
you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think just like keep helping people and keep,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, girl, I'm burnt out now. I work, I go to school, I have 3 kids, I run all these different things on the side. I know you're burnt out with the different platforms that you have, with the podcast, with the comunidad, and like
Yeah.
it's a lot. But if someone has to do it, if we don't do it, who will? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then
Yeah.
we do these things and we inspire other people to do them as well. I mean, that's why we connected in the first place, because like I was so drawn to your page because I was like, wow, look at this other Latina out there just doing something, like being vocal and like making change. Like, so I was just really drawn to your page from the beginning. And that's why I'm like so honored to even be on this podcast episode and just speaking with you and being able to host the Q&A next week. But yeah, I think just keep doing the work you're doing. I don't really have, right? None of us really have the answers, and it's messed up, and I wish more people would do more, but a little bit at a time.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like what you're saying is like cuz my measure of success when I was a teacher was like I needed to change the school. Like I was like this school is racist, like I need to change the school and it's like not realistic. And so I love that you are looking at it like case by case because even the kid that you're helping later today with the STEM stuff, like his trajectory of his life very well may change just because you are helping him apply for this. Like let's say he gets this scholarship or even if he doesn't, right? You just planted like a little seed that like, oh, you can do something, you don't need to just go to ShopRite, which I love ShopRite. Go be a grocer, it's fine. But the point is like you can make a change and you can do what you want and just like believing in someone gives them the permission to also believe in themselves and like you said like maybe they go into STEM or maybe they do something else maybe like entrepreneurship or go to college and do something else it's I agree it's like these little tiny things and yeah, I'm really excited to have you on the Latina Writing Comunidad. Like, I think that's going to be really dope because I know my network is just like us. Like, there's like 30 women that are just like what me and you are describing, and they're just going to be excited to hear what you have to say and support you and follow you on LinkedIn or Instagram, whatever. And just like, it's really I'm glad to be able to like elevate your experience and what you have to say because like you're saying it's important. We need to draw more people to people like us. The radicals, even though I don't think that we're radical at all,
Right.
but
Oh
in
my
the
God.
grand
Yeah.
but in the grand scheme of thing, like I do think that we're viewed as radical because we don't
Yeah.
want the terrible things that are happening across the world. Like there I don't want to over name and traumatize people and make this episode depressing, but the point is I'm excited to give you that platform and normalize
Thank you.
Latinas like this.
Yeah, no, and I agree. A lot of people have called me like radical, and I don't think I'm radical at all. I'm like, oh wow, caring about injustice makes you radical. Calling out bullshit makes you radical. Okay, I guess so. Like, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, I don't think I'm very radical, right? Because if we're talking about like radical, like I mean, those are people that are like abolitionists, like let's get rid of the entire, criminal justice system and all this stuff. I honestly identify more as like a reformist. I think we can change things. I don't think we need to burn everything to the ground first to do it. Hey, and who knows, that viewpoint might change later. You know what I mean? And hey, if anyone's watching, like y'all know, I literally don't mean burning things down. So please don't, you know.
I think that people who believe that, they genuinely do think that. They genuinely think that we need to burn down like buildings and like start from scratch.
Yeah,
But I hear what you're saying. You want to reform it and there's a way to do it. Yeah. I
yeah.
don't know what the answer
Well,
is.
yeah, we none of us do, right? So,
Yeah.
like, and that's what I'm saying. Maybe my viewpoint will change in a few years from now, or a
Yeah.
few months from now, a few weeks
Yeah.
from now. You never know. But at this point in time, I really do believe that we can change things. We just
Yeah.
need more people to be able to do it.
I agree. It's a lot. There's a lot to cover. But is there anything in the book that you want to call out? Because everything that we've been saying so far has to do with the book. So if you like what we're saying, go read the book. I felt like the book was very welcoming. I don't think it was super
Mhm.
jargony. I don't think it was super heavy. It wasn't depressing. I felt like it was really positive and just like a refreshing, like educated conversation.
I think I agree. It was an easy read. It's easy to comprehend. Like, not that I feel like it's our job to be educating people about these issues, but if someone needed to be educated, I'd be like, pick up this book, start there, and then let's have a conversation. But I did want to talk about some themes in the book. Like, I mean, she spoke about how there were students that thought that racism wasn't like their issue to deal with, right? I think one of she quoted a letter that someone wrote to her and was saying something like, oh, it's not my fault that black people don't write, because they were talking about the fact that they hadn't been exposed to black authors. So this white student was like, well, it's not my fault that black people don't write books. And I'm just like, that's crazy, because people still hold that mindset. Even my daughter, one of my daughters, she's 13 years old now, but when she was probably like second or third grade, she asked me, she was like, mommy, am I black? And I was like, no, baby, you're Mexican. Like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, in school, we only talk about black and white people. And I was like, I try to explain to her in the best way I could at the time, like, like that's because we just focus a lot on civil rights and things like that. I'm like, but there was, Chicanos, there was the whole Chicano movement going on around the same time. And I was like, I do realize that we don't get spoken about in education systems. But I think I bring that up because the kid, even though what he said was out of pocket, like, oh, it's not my fault, black people don't write, that's because that's all he's been taught. And so I really want to just bring the focus back to like the K through 12 education system, like what we're teaching students. This kid thought that there was no black authors. My daughter thought that she was black because she was like, I know I'm not white, so I must be black. And then
Yeah.
we don't talk about any other groups in school. The first time I was exposed to a textbook that even mentioned Latino or Hispanic people was in college. And not obviously college is not accessible to everyone. So like some people go through their whole K through 12 and don't even read about other groups, Asian Americans, Native Americans, except for like maybe when they do a segment in November on Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? I just really liked how she taught about the problems that we see in the schools, and she put a statistic out there that like I think in 2014 over 50% of the public school students were or are minorities. So it's like, okay, now that we make up over 50% of the public school system, why aren't we talking more about our groups? I mean, they should have been talking about us regardless, but
Yeah.
where is that information?
Yeah.
Why aren't they teaching about other people that contributed to this country and were part of its growth and are a part of its growth right now,
Well,
That
we know why. Like, that's something that I try to do too. It's like with people that I know, I'm like, when people ask are like, why don't they do these things? We know the reasons. Especially when we're shocked and we're like, oh, I can't believe this executive order. It's like, how can they do this? No, no, we know how they can do this. This
Mhm.
is how it works. We have to stop being shocked. We have to stop asking questions. Why? Because we know the answer. And it's because of racism. And maybe it's unconscious. Like, maybe it's the school thinking that there if we allow Black people and women and you just BIPOC in general, if we allow them to take up space, there's less space for us, and that's just not the case, right? Like here's the circle of space, and it's like it just grows when you get people, when you allow people to come in. It doesn't half and half. It doesn't have to be like that. Just the spaces grow. And I think it's really important to note that, like you were saying, they were talking about the school a lot. She provided so much resources for parents. It's like you could have very well yelled at your daughter and been like, "No, you're not Black. What makes you say that? How can you say that?" Like yelling at your 7-year-old for not knowing any better. And people do that
Hmm.
because race is a hard topic and because of colorism. You being Mexican, you very well could have yelled at her and told her she was white and not Black because of colorism, right? And so she provides a lot of information for parents, like don't shame them, don't yell at them, like ask questions. And maybe sometimes you say, I don't really know. And you come back to the conversation a week later. But when you ignore it or shame them or yell at them, even at the store, right? Like if your kid sees someone, let's say in a wheelchair and they're staring, don't yell at them and have this negative association with people with disabilities or people with differences, including
Hmm.
skin color, including ethnicity, cultures, right? You have to create a space as a parent or as an adult in a child's life. Like I'm not a parent, but I'm a tia. And so I take it upon myself when I'm with them to be open and honest and vulnerable and Google things with them. She provides a lot of context, and I think it's just a lot of people get scared. They don't want to get it wrong. They don't want to be racist. And especially like, we're older now, like I'm 33. Like what you say now is not what we were saying 20 years ago. Like
Hmm.
things do change, and I think it's okay to like say X, Y, and Z today, and then as we grow and change and society changes, like I think it's okay to be like, "Oh, we don't use that term anymore." Or,
Hmm.
"Oh, we used to say this thing. We used to think this was true, but new information has come, research has shown, and we're now changing." It's like we have to let that happen because when we don't, we get people afraid of talking about it. And then if you're not talking about it, they create their own assumptions. Like Black people don't write, Black people are not authors, Black people are not smart. Like they it's a natural thing to be like, "Oh, there's no information. The only thing that I see about Black people on TV or movies is that they're criminals." Duh, they're criminals. And it's like that's why we have to talk about these things. I like that you had that conversation with your daughter and normalized it.
I know I have conversations like this a lot. Like me and my kids talk about a lot of this type of stuff. We don't hold back. I mean, they used to go to protests with me. They used to be on the most dangerous street corners of Chicago, like handing out food to people. And like, I mean, they've been through a lot. They went to schools like the schools that are in the book, those segregated schools that the author's speaking about. Like, so my kids know a lot. They've been through a lot, and we have these kind of conversations. Even right before this podcast, my daughter was like, "Are you nervous?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm nervous just to talk about these kind of issues." And I asked my daughter, I'm like, "So, what do you think?" I'm like, "Do you think that there's still racism?" And she's like, "Yeah, duh." And then like she just started sharing with me some of her experiences, and I knew she was going to answer that, but I just wanted to give her an opportunity to share some stuff. And she actually was talking about less of racism but more discrimination in between other groups. And I think that's exactly what you were talking about. There's space for all of us, but sometimes we think that there's not, and I think that's intentional. People want us to think that we all have to be fighting each other for resources and for this space, and we don't. There's enough for everybody. But my daughter did bring that up, and we got to talk about it. And I think another thing that I liked that she wrote about in the book was just how racism is a systemic issue, like we've been talking about. And she didn't put it so much on the individual, because I feel like when we put it on the individual, it's easy for people to say, like, I don't have a racist bone in my body. I have a Black best friend. How can I be racist? You have to realize that, like, yeah, on a micro level, you can get along with everyone and you don't have a racist bone in your body, supposedly, but there's institutionalized racism in education, employment, like you were just speaking about with the hiring practices, and policing and housing, and just every single social in the church. Like there's so much embedded in all our institutions. So for people to say that like racism doesn't exist, or it's not a factor into how you are treated and perceived in this world, is just complete BS to me.
Yeah. I'm really glad that your daughter is thinking about these things. I'm excited for her to grow up and be part of this group of people that are trying to make the world better in that way. But I feel like one of the things, like when we're talking about like the space, like not only is there enough space, but we have to actively give our people the space. We have to share the space, right? Like
Mhm.
I am in the podcasting thing, so I try to have every progressive woman that I know, Latina, I try to have them on the thing. Like even not even just a Latina, like I have white friends too and they've been on the podcast. Like if you're progressive, it's like come join me, right? And I do that and there are so many Latinas who also do that too. Be that example because by me doing that, then the 20, 25 people who are watching me, they're like, "Oh, I should be doing that too." And it's just like this trickle effect like you were saying. We have to be the example and do these little tiny things and it's going to create a wave and turn into something
Yeah. I
a
mean, I
lot
see
bigger.
it with your own platforms. Like, I've seen the growth and like the following that you gain. So I feel like when you're authentic and when you speak about issues that really matter, you're gonna bring people in one by one and just create this entire community. So
Yeah.
I've seen it happen with Chicklet and the Latina Writing Comunidad. I'm
Yeah.
super proud of you, by the way. Super proud.
Thank you. Stop. And thank you so much for wearing the sweater. I love that. Thank you for supporting me.
Like,
I love it. I love it. And another thing is like the book, it doesn't just talk about like black things. Like it talks
right.
about Asian, indigenous
I love that
people.
she included other people in the book. Hmm.
Right, and, like, when she was talking about Latinidad, like, I learned a lot when she talked about the different demographics, right? Because when we think of Latino, like, I don't think anyone listening to this podcast thinks this, but, like, in general, when people think of Latino, they think of, like, one stereotype, right? Or maybe they only know 1 or 2 Latinos, and that's their definition of Latinos, and that's just not the case. We're not a
Hmm.
monolith. There's millions of us, right? Even learning about Puerto Rico and then also learning about Cubans in the US. There was a wave during when socialism came. So learning about their immigration pattern and why they came here. And then the second wave, which was a very different demographic than the first wave.
Hmm.
And now they're all just chilling in Miami. So even like within Cubans, it's not a monolith. And same thing with Colombians. Like there's a wide range just within the country,
Hmm.
right? And then versus US people and then the classism and the colorism, it's so complex and I really enjoyed reading that about.
But I actually forgot. Like you just reminded me. I forgot she was dropping all that information. Like I remember, like because I did the audiobook
Yeah.
and then I bought the print copy just to like go through and make notes. But I remember hearing the chapter on different groups, and I was like, "This is fantastic!" And it reminded me a lot about this book called Harvest of Empire. And it talks about all the things that you're talking about. It talks about how like the U.S. went and like meddled into all of Latin America and caused chaos and disruption, which is and basically the theory of the book is that's why they came to the U.S. And I first read it in my Latinx politics class in undergrad, and it's still one of my favorite books to this day just because I've never ever had the opportunity to actually read the history of Latin America like that and just read about all these different groups too. So I'd really recommend that book to you and the listeners if you want to like learn more or just see other content about us. Like we already discussed, it's not out there. You have to look for it, or you have to be enrolled in liberal colleges that you have to pay crazy tuition for. So you know,
So there's that. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm definitely gonna read the book. Yeah, I always blame the US. Even Colombians in the US were very Republican. Like they love Trump and they love Uribe, which is like Colombia's Trump. And I think it's because there's so much poverty and Colombia has fallen victim to the US. So it's like we're so destabilized back home that we come here and we blame our home country. And it's like, bro, like, yes, our home country owes us and like needs to be a good government, obviously. And also, the US does whatever it wants and destabilizes us. And then we have to come here. And then now you're a Trump supporter. You're loving the people that destabilized you, the group, and you are going against your own people because back home in Colombia, there are a lot of progressive people. There are socialists, there are communists, there are people who want to reform the government, and they talk about racism and healthcare. They talk about all of these things, and there's a lot of progressive things happening, but it's just mostly happening back home in Colombia. But I want to talk about one last thing before we close the
Yes,
podcast. Bad Bunny's album.
it's a masterpiece.
No, life changing.
Yeah,
Life
I
changing.
mean,
There is a before Bad Bunny's album, and then there's an after Bad Bunny's album. Like for Latinos in the US. I really believe so.
and I think I couldn't have come at a better time either. Like it just really made us proud and even aware to issues. I saw like I'm on Facebook still. Like I'm 32. You shared your 33, so like Facebook is still a thing for me. I know, and some people in their 20s are like, what kind of app is that? Like Facebook, what? I still go on Facebook, so I've seen people on Facebook talking about the Bad Bunny album, and some are Puerto Ricans, and they're saying that he like woke them up to issues that they didn't realize, like, or didn't like care about before. And I think that's great. Like, I love that it got this conversation going, and especially with everything going on right now and all this hate against Latinos or Hispanics or any other group in the country. I really love that the album came at such a right time. It was like meant to be at this time.
Yeah, and I feel like even if you don't even listen to the words, just the fact that he's paying homage to like our music, our cultural music from like 50, 60 years ago. Like
Mhm.
my grandparents back in Colombia, like I never met either one of them, but it's like they like listen to this type of music. You
Mhm.
know, they listen to the same like instruments and the sonidos, like everything. They listen to it, and it was our culture. And then we all left our home countries and we came to the US, and it's very easy to forget your heritage. But then Bad Bunny is coming and reminding all of us of all of our collective struggle. Like anything that's happening in Puerto Rico, it can pertain to all of our countries, right?
Mhm.
It's not for Colombians, but all of the things that he's talking about, it pertains to Colombia. So as a Colombian, it's like it's such a love letter to Puerto Rico. I acknowledge that, and I also take it as a love letter to my own country, and then reminding me or any other Colombian in the US, like this is your country, this is your heritage. It's so beautiful. I just really love it. Like even this morning I was literally driving listening to Baile Inolvidable, and I cried. Like I can't listen to that song and not cry. It's like it's so heartbreaking, and it's so complex because he's also talking about fucking bitches in it as well, which
Yeah.
I also enjoy. Like I enjoy reggaeton. I love the dirty talk. Like I know it's womanizing and whatever, but as an independent woman, I kind of do want my man to womanize me sometimes in the bedroom because I trust him and I love him and I know he's not going to hurt me. I don't want a strange man to do it, but you want your man to like want you, so it's like I like the wide range of it. If you don't
Mhm.
like reggaeton, fine. You got like 5 songs for you. If you only
Mhm.
like salsa, perfect. He's got salsa songs. It's like such a wide range, and I think it's a really good time to bring everyone together and to talk about these systemic issues like that we're talking about that affect us and our communities and our home countries as well.
Yeah, even by him like having, his residency tour. I mean, he's telling everyone, y'all gonna come to Puerto Rico and spend money in Puerto Rico and like,
Right.
shower on my island and my people, like, and we should like shower them dollars over there,
Exactly.
they deserve it. So yeah, I really do. And I actually cried or teared when I was listening to the album as well. It really grasped at you,
Yeah.
especially as a Latina in the US.
And even Pitorro de Coco, he said on an interview, he was like, I sent that song to my mom and she loved it. And he was like, I don't give a fuck if no one else likes it. You know what I'm saying? Like that's so dope. Like he's so confident, and it's like he wrote that song. Maybe it wasn't for his mom, but it's like true, right? My mom likes it. You think I give a fuck if you don't like it? No, my mom loves it. Like so it's like that sense of love and trust, and like fuck it, I'm going to put it out, and if my mom likes it, it's all good. I aspire to be that
Also,
solid.
it's also resistance too, because even
Yeah,
that's the same mentality he had when he was being interviewed, and then he was asked like, "Oh, like what if like people can't understand?" And I know you saw that, and he was like, I don't care. Like, I don't care if people can't understand what I'm saying. Like, then the same for y'all. Like, that's the mentality he had. And I agree. It's like, why do we have to conform to what other people want? He doesn't need to like do a crossover album to be big. He can just be himself and he can represent us in exactly the way he's been doing, and it's fine. He doesn't need to change. Latin American artists don't need to change. Like, this is who he
Yep.
is. This is what we like, and that's it.
I love it, and I really like that. I mean, he has a whole album called "Yo hago lo que me da la gana." So what did y'all think that he was gonna do? Make an album, that's gonna
Mhm.
appease people? No. Like, it's for him, his family, his heritage, Puerto Rico, and that's it. Anything else is extra, and I love that. It's so dope. And I honestly I take those lessons with me as well. Same thing for my Latina Writing Comunidad, right? If you don't like the fucking content or if you don't like how progressive it is, bitch, don't come. Like, this is not for you. The
Exactly.
space is not for you. Google it and also hire me. I charge people $200 an hour to have race conversations. So if
There
you
you
want to
go.
talk about a bitch, Venmo me and we can have the conversation. But if not, if you're progressive, you're Latina, or if you're not Latina, come join us because we're going to have these conversations and try to be progressive and keep pushing our people that way because we exist. I don't know that we exist a lot in the US, but by us doing these things, you going to school, being a lawyer, and all of the things that you're going to do in your career, and like me and what I'm doing, like all of us doing these things is going to keep pushing the needle, I hope,
Yeah,
right?
100%. And I love that you are like, I'll charge $200 an hour if you want to come talk about this shit with me, as you should. Enough of like giving out our free labor. No more. Oh, can I pick your brain? Like, no, pay us for our services because we have a whole lot to contribute. Like we talked about earlier, Latinas have a lot to contribute. We are here. We're doing the damn thing. Give us our space. So I love that. Keep charging, sis.
No one has given me money yet, but
But just
that
that you
is
have it out there, just that you have it, like, if you want to have this conversation with me, if you want, like, $200, you know?
$200 girl. And tell your friends too, because I'll talk to them too if you for $200 an hour. But anyways, thank you so much for being on here. I know we only have an hour and I don't want to take up your whole afternoon. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before I close us out?
I want to read more books by Dr. Tatum. I feel like she has a lot to say. I mean, gosh, she has so much experience. She was the president of Spelman College. Like she's a big deal. And here you go. Here's a black author that has contributed so much that I didn't know about until I picked up this book. So it goes back to what she even wrote about that student. Well, it's not my fault. Black people don't write. We write. Latinos write, Latinos create like you, and we need to just be out there and keep doing what we're doing, and more people will eventually see us.
And if they don't, it's fine. I'm here for my people. Like, I
Mhm.
want my people who are going to work, feeling isolated, feeling burnt out, like, sames, bitch. Let's hang out. Like, because let's literally, like, that's why I'm doing my in-person events too. It's like, if you're fucking tired, me too. Let's go listen to music and sit together and talk about it and fucking cry together, and let's try to help people. Let's all do this, all of it together.
Yeah,
You don't have to struggle alone through it.
right. I wish there was a community like the one you've created, even here in Georgia. I wish there was one that I could just, if, shoot, let me tell you, once I have this lawyer money, I'm flying to New Jersey for your in person events, okay?
You're gonna be too booked and busy. I'm gonna have to go to Georgia and we'll host an in-person event together. We'll do that.
All right. Well, I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to
Yes.
it. Thank you so much for having
Amazing.
me.
No, thank you for being on. I'm gonna see you on Instagram. If anyone wants to follow her or connect with her, just go to the show notes, the description. It's all there. Um, Join my Latina Writing Comunidad, bi-weekly virtual calls, come to my in-person events. Just follow me on Instagram and I will tell you everything. But the next episode is gonna be on the book First Gen by Alejandra Campoverde with Dr. Lizette, the first gen psychologist. So if you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment, and leave a review. If you have any book recommendations or want to be on the podcast, let me know. Thank you for listening. Bye.